welcome to this video lecture, and in this video lecture I will be discussing previous year's NEET questions and also their explanations. Okay, and as you can see on your screen, this is for the chapter Body Fluids and Circulation, and this is part 1 of the series. All right, and also if you watched my previous lectures, you would know that please keep a paper and pen with you so that you can write down your answers and then also note down the explanations if you need to. Okay, so let's begin. All right, question number 1. Match the following columns and select the correct option. Okay, so you have column 1 over here, you have column 1 and you have column 2. Okay, and you have your ABCD 1 2 3 4 and you have to match the columns. All right, so I would suggest you pause the video now and write down what you think is the right answer and then come back to this video. Okay, fine. So as you can see, this question appeared in NEET 2020. It's pretty recent, right? It's last year. All right, so first option A, that's eosinophils. Let's solve the question over here itself. Let's match the columns and see. Eosinophils. Okay, first you have column 2 with the first option, immune response. So I don't think that is the appropriate answer for eosinophils. Second is phagocytosis. Eosinophils are phagocytic, they are weak phagocytes, but we'll look at the other options and we'll come back. 3. Release histaminase and destructive enzymes. Yes, that is possible. So 3 is a possible answer, yes, but we look at option 4. Release granules containing histamine. No, not really. It doesn't release histamine. So 3 is the appropriate answer for A. Alright. So next one, basophils. Basophils, immune response, no. Phagocytosis, no. They release granules containing histamine, that is true. So you have B4. Then you have C, neutrophils. Neutrophils are phagocytosis, they're phagocytic. So C2 is the right answer for neutrophils. Lymphocytes, they participate in immune response. All right, so your answer should be A3, B4, C2 and D1. Okay, so your answer should have been A. So if you've written A, that means that is your correct answer, and we'll look at the explanation for this answer. Okay, so as we have seen, eosinophils release histaminase. So histaminase is an enzyme which breaks down histamine. Okay, histamine is released by mast cells and basophils also during an allergic reaction. So eosinophils release histaminase, and so that breaks down histamine, and so it reduces the effect of histamine. Okay, and also eosinophils attach themselves to juvenile forms of the parasite. Okay, they have another important function. Apart from releasing histaminase, they also attach themselves to juvenile forms of parasite and release substances. Now they release many chemical factors, and one of them being hydrolytic enzymes. Okay, eosinophils, another function, they release hydrolytic enzymes from their granules, which are modified lysosomes. So these granules are actually modified lysosomes, and these hydrolytic enzymes kills the parasite. So they participate against parasitic infection by releasing hydrolytic enzymes. Also, they release histaminase. Okay, which breaks down histamine. Okay. Let me choose another pen. All right, so your next option was basophils. Now basophils release histamine. They release histamine, they release serotonin. So one of them is release one of the functions is to release histamine along with the mast cells in allergic reactions. So mast cells also participate in allergic reaction, as well as basophils also participate in allergic reactions. Okay, and if you have watched my previous video on breathing and exchange of gases, I have explained allergic reaction in a little bit of detail. I'll explain it again over here. Okay, and so when this histamine is released from mast cells and basophils, a series of actions happen. Okay, and some of them are contraction of local smooth muscles. So the smooth muscles of the bronchi and the bronchioles, they contract, causing obstruction in breathing. They increase the permeability of capillaries, so fluid leaks out in the tissues. They also attract neutrophils and eosinophils to the site. Okay, they attract neutrophils and eosinophils to the site. So neutrophils, they attack foreign matter that is present there, foreign debris. And eosinophils, what do? As we have already seen, they release histaminase that detoxifies their effect. Also, one more function is they destroy the antigen antibody complexes that have been formed. Okay, that is another function of eosinophils, okay, during an allergic reaction. Just erase this part. Sorry about that. All right. Neutrophils. Now, neutrophils are phagocytic. They are not phagocytotic. Sorry about that. Phagocytic in nature. And so, what does that mean? They perform cellular ingestion of pathogens. Okay, they perform cellular ingestion of pathogens. Okay, so another feature of neutrophils is that they have a feature called chemotaxis. Okay, they have a feature called chemotaxis. So they respond to any substance that is released. Okay, so they are attracted towards that pathogen and they chase the pathogen and they perform cellular ingestion. Okay, so this is the neutrophil. They'll chase the pathogen over here and they will ingest the pathogen. Okay, so they perform cellular ingestion of pathogens. That's called phagocytic. Okay, and we'll look at the last one, T lymphocytes. Now, T lymphocytes are in an inactive form and they become activated to form activated T cells, and B cells activate to form antibodies, and they in turn react against specific antigens. Okay, they react against specific antigens that were first formed because of the immune response. Okay, so that means if an antigen or a pathogen has entered the body, T cells and antibodies were formed with respect to that antigen that first attack. So next time if you have the same pathogen or the antigen attack your body, these T cells and antibodies will again get activated and destroy that pathogen. Okay, so they respond to these pathogens, these pathogenic attack in your body. Okay, I will explain the allergic reaction to you again so that you know. So you have, in an allergic patient, a person who is allergic, they have IgE antibodies, and usually large amounts of IgE antibodies. So what happens is they attach to these mast cells. Okay, they attach to mast cells. Also, another cell that is involved is basophil. Okay, I'll write B here, which means basophils. So basophils are also involved in this reaction. So now let's say an antigen or an allergen has entered the system, the respiratory passageway. Okay, and they attach to these antibodies, okay, forming antigen and antibody complexes. Okay, they attach. So what happens is the mast cell and these basophils react. Okay, so basophil begins to release histamine. Mast cells also begin to release histamine. Okay, and this causes a lot of reaction in the respiratory passageway, that is inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles. So what happens is contraction happens of smooth muscles over there, so that it increases the difficulty in breathing. The capillaries become more permeable, so there is leakage of fluid into the tissues, increases. Also it attracts eosinophils and neutrophils. Okay, so eosinophils and neutrophils, the neutro is a eosino, they come to this region. Okay, so like I previously mentioned, eosinophils, they release histaminase. Okay, they release histaminase which breaks down histamine. Okay, they release histaminase along with other factors, not histaminase, this is not the only chemical factor that is released. Okay, they release, one of them is histaminase, and they reduce the effect of histamine. Okay, another function of eosinophils is they break down these antigen antibody complexes over here. Okay, they break down these antigen antibody complexes over here. Okay, reducing its effect. Also, neutrophils will attack any foreign debris that is present there. Okay, so this is the function of eosinophils, neutrophils, basophils, mast cells. This is how they are actually interacting with each other in an allergic reaction. Okay, so now when you go back to the question, let's look at the question again. Now it will be easier for you. Now actually, you know what, this is actually a good question. I would give it a smiley face. Why? Because they have managed to fool you. They have managed to fool the student into thinking, oh, they have confused you with histaminase and histamine. Histaminase is not there in NCERT. Histaminase is not there in NCERT. So if you were smart enough, you would have used the rule of elimination. Okay, you would have used the rule of elimination. That means you would have eliminated all the options that were not fitting in. Okay, so if you knew your subject, your theory very well, you would have known basophils releases histamine. Okay, not histaminase or anything like that. Also, destructive enzyme was a giveaway. The word destructive enzyme was a giveaway for eosinophils. Those release hydrolytic enzymes and they are useful against parasitic infections. Okay, so this was if you didn't know what histamine is, now you do. Obviously, if you watch this lecture, you know what it is, what it means, and what it actually does. You would be able to answer this question quite easily without any doubts. Okay, so this is actually a good question and tricking you into forcing you into choosing the wrong answer. But if you had the presence of mind at that moment, you could have selected the correct answer. Okay, so this was actually a good question. All right, let's move on to the next question. Question number 2. Okay, let's look at the question. All right, again, this is matching. Match the items given in column 1 with those in column 2 and select the correct option given below. Okay, so you have column 1 and you have column 2. Again, I would suggest you pause the video and you select your right answer and then come back to this question. Alright, so this question appeared in NEET 2018. Okay, let's solve the question here. Okay, so you have fibrinogen, globulin, albumin, and you have your column 2. You have to match it with column 2. Fibrinogen, blood clotting is the right answer. Fibrinogen participates in blood clotting. Globulin is defense mechanism. Right, that is the right answer. Albumin is osmotic. balance. Okay, albumin helps in maintaining osmotic balance. So your answer should have been, so it's A2, B3 and C1. So your answer should be D. Okay, answer D. Okay, so if you've got D, that means you've got the right answer. Okay, so let's understand this in detail. Alright, so fibrinogen. Inactive fibrinogen is responsible to form fibrin in the presence of thrombin. Okay, so you have fibrinogen. Okay, this is present in the inactive form, and that is activated to fibrin. Okay, and this is done in the presence of thrombin. Okay, so this fibrin forms a mesh-like network, okay, for clotting. Okay, so indirectly fibrinogen participates in blood clotting. All right, simple. This was pretty direct. If you knew your theory, you would have been able to answer this easily. It shouldn't have been a problem in answering this. Okay, let's look at the next one. Antibodies. Now antibodies are gamma globulins. Okay, they are made up of gamma globulins and also called immunoglobulins. Okay, they are called immunoglobulins, and they have a combination of light and heavy polypeptide chains, and they participate in immune response. Again, please refer to Human Health and Disease chapter, which will explain this in detail. Okay, they participate in human immune response. Alright, so albumin is also a plasma protein, just like fibrinogen and globulin. Albumin is also a plasma protein present in the blood. I will just erase this. Okay, present in the blood, and they allow the flow of fluid into the capillaries to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so let's say you have a network of capillaries. You have the arterial blood flow happening. You have your network of capillaries over here. They're thin, they're all permeable. Okay, and then it is coming out as vein. Okay, it is flowing out as vein, and this is artery. Okay, so you have albumin present over here in the blood, and what that does is it attracts fluid into the system, into the blood flow system. Okay, it attracts. The job of albumin is to attract fluid into the blood flow system, and this process is called colloid osmotic pressure or oncotic pressure. Okay, this whole process is called colloid osmotic pressure or oncotic pressure. Okay, now what actually happens? Why do you need this oncotic pressure? Okay, let's understand this in a little bit of detail. Okay, so blood flows through the arteries over here. Now there is high pressure over here. There's high pressure of blood flowing over here. So what happens is it tends to push out fluid. It tends to push out fluid. There is albumin also present here, but the hydrostatic pressure, this is what you call hydrostatic pressure, the pressure by which fluid is being pushed out. Hydro pressure is more than the oncotic pressure in this region. Okay, so fluid is being pushed out, okay, because of this very high pressure over here coming from the artery. So now, but you cannot allow fluid to just keep flowing out. There has to be a balance. Always in a body, there is always a balance that is maintained. Okay, so you can't just allow fluid to be pushed out of the capillaries. It has to be brought in also. Then oncotic pressure comes into effect over here. So by the time it reaches the vein, hydrostatic pressure decreases and oncotic pressure hence increases in this region. So fluid moves back into the blood system. Okay, so what you see is a flow. It's like a circulation over here. Hydrostatic pressure pushing or oncotic pressure pulling it in, hydrostatic pressure pushing or oncotic pressure pulling it in. So what you see is a micro circulation happening inside this region. Okay, that is why albumin is important to pull the fluid back into the blood flow. Okay, so this is what it means. This is how albumin participates in the osmotic pressure, the colloid osmotic pressure. Okay, now colloid is actually are substances that cannot pass through the capillary, so they called colloid. Okay, they cannot diffuse through this capillary region. Okay, so they are called colloid. Or another term given is oncotic pressure. So this fluid is being pulled in. That means there's low solute concentration here towards high solute concentration. And so fluid moves in. Okay, so this was pretty simple to understand. This is how albumin participates. Now fibrinogen, globulin, albumin, all are plasma proteins. Okay, so but albumin is present in more amount, and so that participates in the oncotic pressure. They maintain that osmotic balance. Okay, so that should have been the right answer for this question. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, next question, question number 3. Adult human RBCs are enucleate. Which of the following statement or statements is our most important explanation for this feature? Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, I would suggest you pause the video and think about the answer, then come back. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this question appeared in NEET 2017. So the first one is they do not need to reproduce. They do not need to reproduce is not really an explanation for why RBCs are enucleate. So RBCs are formed from proerythroblasts in the bone marrow, in the red bone marrow. Okay, so they are produced from there, and as they mature they lose their nucleus. But that's not really explaining the answer, the question in hand. Why are adult human RBCs enucleate? So let's look at the second one. They are somatic cells. Yeah, they are somatic cells, but again that doesn't really answer the question. They do not metabolize. They do metabolize, but there's limited metabolism. Okay, there is limited metabolism. Okay, and that is anaerobically done, because RBCs also need energy, right? Okay, RBCs also need energy, but if they use up all the oxygen and all present in that, then there is no point of RBCs transporting oxygen. So their metabolism is done anaerobically, and it's limited metabolism. Okay, so that doesn't really answer our question, why are adult human RBCs enucleate. Fourth one, all their internal space is available for oxygen transport. Yes, that is true. They have hemoglobin. RBCs contain hemoglobin which transport oxygen. Okay, they transport CO2 also, but they transport majorly oxygen. And so your answer should have been 4. Answer should have been D. Let me just erase this part. Yeah, so answer should have been D. Alright, so let's look at the explanation. I think I've explained it to you over here, but we look at the explanation. So like I said, RBCs are produced in the red bone marrow, okay, and they are first formed as proerythroblasts, but then as they mature, the cell organelles, they are reabsorbed or they become remnants, okay, they remain as remnants in the cell. So they are somatic cells, but there is no connection with mature RBCs being enucleated. Again, they are capable of limited metabolism, okay, that is done anaerobically. I've explained that to you. Now, the absence of nucleus, they make space for hemoglobin and the storage of O2 and CO2 for their seamless transport in the blood, majorly O2. Okay. Alright, so I think I've answered this question. We'll move on to the next question. Question number 4. Okay. Alright. Name the blood cells whose reduction in number can cause clotting disorder, leading to excessive loss of blood from the body. Okay, so we have our options A, B, C and D. Again, pause the video and think about what the answer should be and then come back. Okay, so name the blood cells whose reduction number can cause clotting disorder. D, there is no doubt about it. This is a fact. Okay, thrombocytes, also known as platelets. Okay, they're also known as platelets. Okay, we look at the explanation. The answer should have been D, of course. Okay, so thrombocytes, also known as platelets, like I said, they release procoagulant factors. Okay, procoagulant factors, that is, they help in the coagulation, okay, of blood, and they cause the formation of cross-linking bridges of fibrin fibers, which result in clot retraction. So, like I said, fibrin mesh is formed here. Platelets, they release some factors, okay, that cause clot retraction. That means the clot reduces in size. When the clot reduces in size, okay, it is healing. It's a process of healing. So the clot reduces in size and it actually oozes out serum. You see yellow color liquid, okay, that's called serum. Okay, so these platelet factors that are released from the platelets, they help in the clot retraction. Okay, that means the clot reduces in size. So that is why it is important for platelets to be present in your blood. Excessive loss of platelets could then result in loss of blood. So if there are low number of thrombocytes, it result in clot reaction not occurring. Okay, so clot reaction will not occur because it cannot release those procoagulant factors. Okay, so this was pretty direct. This shouldn't have been a problem in answering this question. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 5. Okay, serum differs from blood in, and then you have your 4 options. This appeared in NEET to 2016. Again, pause the video and think about the answer and then come back to this question. Okay, so serum differs from blood in what? I just explained serum to you. Think about it just in the previous slide. Okay, they differs from blood in lacking clotting factors. They lack clotting factors. Okay, so if you have written C, that is your correct answer. Okay, let's look at the discussion. So when the clot contracts, becomes small, that means clot retraction happens, it oozes out serum. Okay, serum is like a yellow colored liquid. It's yellow in color, and these lack clotting factors. Okay, they lack the clotting factors and fibrinogen and fibrinogen. Very important, huh? Very important to understand the difference between plasma and serum. This is a very, very important difference between plasma and serum. Serum don't have clotting factors. No clotting factors. So to answer your question, they lack clotting factors. Okay, this is simple. All right. Let's move on to the next question. All right, question number 6. Let's look at what it is. All right. Erythropoiesis starts in, this appeared in 2015, but it's a cancelled paper. Okay, we'll look at the options A, B, C, and D. Again, pause the video, think about what you think is the right answer, and then come back. So erythropoiesis starts in red bone marrow. Red bone marrow in adult, in human beings. Okay, in human beings starts in red bone marrow. But we look at the difference there. Okay, there are other places also. So after birth, erythropoiesis or red blood cell, erythropoiesis is another term for red blood cell production. Okay, it is done by the red bone marrow. Okay, but before birth, what happens? So in the fetus, in the gestation period, nucleated RBCs are produced in the yolk sac, and during the middle trimester, liver is the main organ for RBC production. So when in the gestation period, when a mother is pregnant, so in the fetus, it begins in the yolk sac. This is important information to remember, and then by the middle trimester, it switches over to liver. So in human beings, after birth, it is red bone marrow, and then in the during the gestation period, it is yolk sac, and then by middle trimester, liver. Okay, so please remember this information. This also could be asked in a question. Okay, so this is the right answer. Red bone marrow is therefore erythropoiesis. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This was simple, this was direct. If you knew your fact correctly, properly, you could have answered this question. It was direct. All right, question number 7. Okay, a person with blood group AB is considered as universal recipient because he has, we have your options A, B, C, and D. A is both A and B antigens on RBC but no antibodies in the plasma. Yes, that is actually the correct answer. B, both A and B antibodies in the plasma. No. C, no antigen on RBC and no antibody in the plasma. No. D, both A and B antigen in the plasma but no antibodies. No. It should be A. The answer should be A. And yes, of course, this question appeared in 2014. Okay, so let's look at the explanation. Alright, so all you need to do is remember this table. Honestly speaking, you don't need to think too much. Just remember this table and what is the principle behind this. Okay, so if a person has AB blood group, okay, person has AB blood group, okay, that means the antigens are A, B present in the surface of the RBCs, but there are no antibodies in the plasma. No antibodies in the plasma. So it can give blood to somebody who has a blood group of AB, and it can receive blood from AB, A, B, and O. It can receive blood from people who have blood group as AB, A, B, and O. Okay, because it has no antibody. So what happens if it receives blood from these people, no antigen antibody reaction will occur, so we are safe. Antigen antibody reaction will not occur. Okay, so that person is safe from any problem. Okay, there will be no adverse reaction, you don't need to deal with all that. So it is a universal recipient. It is called as a universal recipient. If I spell this right. Okay. Alright, so I think there is no need for more explanation, though this was quite simple again. If you knew this table properly, you could have answered this question quite easily. Okay. Also, you need to understand the different blood groups, the antigen antibodies present in that blood group in the plasma, and then who it can give blood to, who it cannot give blood to. Okay, so yeah, let's move on to the next question. Question number 8. Okay, the figure shows a human blood cell. Identify it and give its characteristics. Okay, so you have A, B, C and D, and you have the characteristics. This occurred in NEET 2013 Karnataka. Okay, and let's answer this question then. So what you see over here, diagram, is actually a basophil. Sorry, it's actually a basophil, and that secretes serotonin and inflammatory response. Okay, B lymphocytes forms about 20% of blood cells involved in immune response. Now, B lymphocytes are involved in immune response, but B and T lymphocytes together form the 20% of blood cells. Neutrophil, most abundant blood cells, phagocytic. Yes, that is true, but this is not a neutrophil. Monocytes, lifespan of 3 days, produces antibodies. No, that is also incorrect. Okay, so your answer should be A. Okay, that is the right answer. We'll look at the discussion. C. So this diagram over here is from NCERT. Please study all the NCERT diagrams properly. See, but you've got a question like that. So clearly you can see this is the basophil. Okay, it's a basophil, and you have the other types of cells also, but you need to learn what basophil looks like. Okay. So basophils secrete serotonin and participate in inflammatory response. I've already explained this. B and T lymphocytes form 20% of the blood cells. Monocytes have a lifespan for 10 to 20 hours in blood, and they form macrophages. Okay, so basophil is the right answer for this. This was also direct, but provided you knew this diagram, this whole box well. Provided you knew this whole box well, you should have been able to answer this question correctly. This shouldn't have been a problem at all. This was again direct. You should have just be careful with the description, the characteristics, and also learn this diagram properly. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Question number 9. Okay. A certain road accident patient with unknown blood group needs immediate blood transfusion. His one doctor friend at once offers his blood. What was the blood group of the donor? Okay, so his friend, there is an unknown blood type. We are not aware of the blood group. But his doctor friend at once offers his own blood. So what type of blood would that be? So it has to be a universal donor. It has to be a universal donor. So your answer should be blood group O. Okay, so your answer should be C. Okay, and this appeared in 2012. Again, we'll look at the discussion. It is the same table over here. Just see how important this table is. Okay, this table is very important to study. If you knew everything, you would have been able to answer this question correctly. So, with blood group O, there are no antigens present. So we have O, there are no antigens present here. It has antibodies A and B in that plasma. So it is able to donate blood to either A, B, O and AB. So what it is a universal donor. Okay, it is a universal donor. Since there are no antigens present, it goes to another person's body, so no reaction will happen. No reaction happens, so that person is safe. So it is okay to transfuse blood from one person to another. So it behaves like a universal donor. And what we studied previously, AB is a universal recipient, can get blood from AB, and O. Okay, this is important to remember. It has appeared again. This question has appeared again. That means this piece of information is important. All right. Okay, so if you knew your facts correctly, again, you should have been able to answer this question correctly. There shouldn't have been a problem at all. All right, next question. Question number 10. All right. Which one of the following human organs is often called the graveyard of RBCs? This appeared in Mains 2012. Graveyard of RBCs is such a depressing term, but it does a very good job. Okay, so you have gallbladder, you have kidney, you have spleen, you have liver. This is again a direct question. Okay, if you knew your fact properly, you should have been able to answer this question correctly. So your answer should be C, spleen. Okay, we'll discuss this answer now. Okay, so what you see here is a structure of the spleen. Okay, so you have this is the internal structure. Okay, the functional parts of spleen. So you have your pulp here, you have capillary. I'll just change this pen so you can see more clearly. Pulp here, you have the capillaries here, venous sinuses, and you have the vein and artery. Okay, so blood, what happens is blood moves from here into the capillaries. Now these capillaries in the spleen are very permeable. Okay, these capillaries are very permeable. Okay, so blood cells tend to ooze out of these capillaries and into the pulp. Okay, blood cells tend to ooze out from these capillaries and into the pulp. Okay, where they enter the trabecular mesh and they are stored there. So one other important function of spleen is storage of RBCs. Okay, another important function is storage of RBCs. It not only acts as a graveyard of RBCs but also storage. Now what happens is, now you have your, let's say you have a capillary here, you have RBC here. Okay, so they ooze out. They ooze out, and this is your trabecular, your pulp. Okay, your trabecular mesh work in the pulp, and RBCs are tend to be stored there in the pulp. It's called the red pulp. This place where RBCs are stored in the spleen is called the red pulp. Okay, so when this process happens, there will be some fragile RBCs, there will be some RBCs which are old and worn out, so they cannot handle this trauma of being squeezed out. Okay, they cannot handle this trauma of being squeezed out, and so they break. These RBCs then break. They break down. Okay, these RBCs break down, and so you are divided into, the RBCs break down into hemoglobin and the cell stroma. Okay, they break down into hemoglobin and cell stroma. Okay, so then there are reticuloendothelial cells in the spleen which then digest this stroma. Okay, and the hemoglobin. Okay, the reticuloendothelial cells will digest the remaining parts of the RBCs. Okay, that have been broken down. We'll look at this. I've written a whole text for this. Yeah. So blood passes through the capillaries in the pulp before entering the venous sinuses. I've already explained that to you, and the capillaries are very permeable, so the red blood cell squeezes through the capillary walls into the trabecular mesh. Okay, we squeeze into the trabecular mesh. Okay, and then some fragile RBCs, there'll be some fragile RBCs, not all of them will be able to handle that trauma of being squeezed out into the trabeculum mesh, and so they are destroyed in this process. Okay, and so the reticuloendothelial cells digest, okay, the hemoglobin and the cell stroma. The cell stroma is the connective tissues, okay, of the RBC, the connective tissue of the RBC, and reticuloendothelial cells are phagocytic in nature. Okay, so they are able to digest the hemoglobin and the cell stroma. So it's like this: when there is cooking happening in the kitchen, there has to be cleaning work also done. You can't just keep the mess. Okay, so when the hemoglobin breaks down, hemoglobin has to go somewhere, right? So the hemoglobin goes to the spleen, and the fragile ones are broken, and the cleaning process is done by the reticuloendothelial cells in the spleen. Okay, so hemoglobin and cell stroma are digested by these cells. Okay, all right. So spleen, again, it's important to study this. This is actually a good question. So it's important to remember these terms, graveyard, of the RBCs and things like that, because then they'll ask questions based on those terms. Okay, and you should know what it means. All right, so this is what actually happens with the RBCs. Okay. Okay, I hope this was clear. We'll move on to the next question. Question number 11. Okay. Which one of the following plasma proteins is involved in the coagulation of blood? Guys, we've already discussed this. Yeah. What is this? A, B, C, and D. Again, pause the video, think about your answer, and then come back. Okay, this appeared in 2011. Okay, and which one of the following plasma proteins? Fibrinogen. Fibrinogen, answer should have been B. Okay, fibrinogen is a plasma protein, is involved in the coagulation of blood. Like I said, they form fibrin. Okay, in the presence of thrombin, we look at this. Yeah, so you have this whole flow chart here. You have fibrinogen. You have fibrinogen over here, and that forms fibrin monomers, and then they form fibrin fibers, and they form cross-linked fibrin fibers. Okay, they form this mesh-like network. Okay, and then platelets come to the rescue. Platelets come to the rescue by releasing procoagulant factors which cause clot retraction. Okay, so this is your, sorry, my pen go here. This is your flow chart which you need to remember. Okay, it is important to remember this. This will help you in understanding the clotting process. Okay. If you want, you can note it down in your book. And we move on to the next question. This was pretty direct. If you knew what coagulation, clotting process, you see fibrinogen, okay, fibrinogen is the answer. Hands down, this is the fact. So there was no need to really think too much about this. Question number 12. Okay. A person with unknown blood, again a blood group question. You remember the table, we've already seen it twice, okay? A person with unknown blood group under ABO system has suffered much blood loss in an accident and needs immediate blood transfusion. So they've given you a situation here. His friend, who has valid certificate of his own blood type, offers for blood donation without delay. What would have been the type of blood group of the donor friend? So what would have been the type? Again, pause the video and write down your answer and then come back. Okay, this appeared in 2000. I think my pen marker keeps disappearing in between. This appeared in 2011. Okay, so if he's donating blood, the friend is donating blood, that means it has to be a universal donor, right? So it has to be type O. Answer should have been C. Correct answer should be C. Okay. All right. Let's look at the discussion again. Hands down, these are facts that you need to remember, guys. Just imagine this table is so important. Please note it down. This is the third time we are seeing this table today in this presentation. So we've already seen so many questions based on this topic, this blood group topic. Okay, so that means it is important that you remember this table for your exam. Okay, because once you remember this table, it is very easy for you to answer your question. Again, we have looked at blood type O, which is a universal donor. I've already explained it to you why this is a universal donor. It has no antigens and it has antibodies A and B in the plasma, and so it is able to donate blood to any type of blood group. Okay. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 13. Okay. All right. Let's read the question. Which two of the following changes, 1 to 4, usually tend to occur in the plain dwellers when they move to high altitudes, that is 3500 meters or more? And you have increase in red blood cell size, increase in RBC production, increased breathing rate, increase in thrombocyte count. Okay, and the changes occurring are, okay, this appeared in the year 2010. So what do you think is the right answer? Again, pause the video, think about this. Is a very good question. This deserves a smiley face. This is a smiley face question. This deserves a smiley face because you need to think, you need to understand physiology, okay, for this to be able to answer this question. Okay, so the answer should be 2 and 3. That is increase in red blood cell production and increased breathing rate. Okay, these two changes amongst those 4 occur in the human body. Okay, when we move to high altitudes, that is 3500 meters or more. So your answer should be A. Okay, A should be the right answer. We look at the discussion. Yeah. So when plain dweller, that means people who are living at sea level like us, we are currently at sea level. When we suddenly move on to our high altitude, 3500 meters or more, we experience mountain sickness. Okay, we experience a condition called mountain sickness where we feel dizzy, we feel nausea, we feel like vomiting, and this is why, because there's a decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen in the air. Okay, so as you move top to the mountain, partial pressure of oxygen decreases. Okay, here I'll write it in. Partial pressure of oxygen decreases at the top. So a low amount of oxygen is being delivered to the tissue, which leads to a condition called hypoxia. This is important. Okay, it leads to a condition called hypoxia because not enough oxygen is being delivered to the tissue cells. Okay, so what happens now? Your body is a very flexible structure. Okay, it is able to acclimatize to that, it is able to adapt to that condition. Okay, it is able to adapt to that condition, and certain changes in your physiology happen during that period. Okay, when you are at the top of the mountain. Okay, now we'll see what the changes are. There's increase in pulmonary ventilation. Okay, increase in breathing rate, that happens. That was there in your question also. Increased number of RBCs increase in your blood, right? There's increased diffusing capacity of lungs, that means the surface area increases. Okay, increased diffusing capacity of lung, that means your surface area of the alveolar capillary increases. Okay, and there's increase in number of capillaries in the tissues. And lastly, increased ability of tissue cells to use O2 despite low PO2. That means your tissue cells also adapt to that change in the low PO2. Then what happens is mitochondria in the cells increase. These 5 changes occur. So according to your question, it was breathing rate and increased number of RBCs. So if you knew these 2 facts, then could have been able to answer the question. But apart from that, other changes are also happening in that physiology. That means diffusing capacity increases, that means surface area increases, then number of capillaries in the tissue increases, and ability of tissue cells to use oxygen in that low PO2 environment also increases. Okay, that means the number of mitochondria in the cells increase. Okay, apart from that, I will make another video where I will talk about changes when you are at a high altitude, and also talk about hypoxia. Talk about hypoxia and that, and so you'll be able to understand this in detail. But to answer your question, pulmonary ventilation and increased number of RBCs is the right answer. Okay, so if you knew that, please remember this fact and you could have answered your question easily. Also remember, it is increased number of RBCs, not the size. Size does not increase, the number of RBCs increase. Don't get confused between those two. Okay, so this was a trick question. You could have easily get caught in that middle. Okay, so it is a number of RBCs increase. Okay. We'll see this in detail. So production of RBCs is facilitated by the decrease in the amount of oxygen transported to the tissues. So this is your cell over here. So O2 decreases, and that triggers the demand for with respect to the demand for oxygen, that triggers the production of RBCs. Okay, that triggers the production of RBCs. Next, kidneys also secrete erythropoietin. Kidneys also secrete erythropoietin, which in turn enhances RBC production. So red bone marrow plus the kidneys participate. Kidneys are also triggering the red bone marrow. So the kidneys release erythropoietin during this hypoxia condition. During this hypoxia condition, and they stimulate the red bone marrow to produce more RBCs. Okay, so you have two functions happening simultaneously. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so that what happens now, when the RBC production increases in the body, the hemoglobin concentration will also increase to 20 grams per deciliter, and the blood volume by 20 to 30%. Okay, so you have more hemoglobin concentration, the blood volume also increases. Okay, so that is able to help in the demand for oxygen in the tissues. All right, so now you know that the PO2 in the atmosphere is low, correct? So due to which the PO2 in the alveolar air is also low, and hence the arterial PO2 also decreases. Okay, so PO2, everything is happening one by one. PO2 in the atmosphere is low, then alveolar air also PO2 decreases, followed by the arterial PO2. Now arterial PO2 decreases, what happens? If you watched my breathing and exchange of gases video, neural and chemical regulation, what happens? It will stimulate the peripheral chemoreceptors, that is the aortic and carotid bodies. Okay, it will stimulate the peripheral chemoreceptors. Guys, wake up, we have low PO2 in the arteries. Okay, we have low PO2 in the blood, so guys, wake up. So peripheral chemoreceptors get stimulated, and they stimulate the DRG to hyperventilate. They stimulate the dorsal group of neurons, a dorsal respiratory group of neurons, and they trigger them to send a signal to hyperventilate. Okay, so peripheral chemoreceptors play an important role in this, and they in turn stimulate the DRG to hyperventilation. Okay, so they perform hyperventilation. Okay, so that is how the breathing rate increases. Now you've answered both the questions, both the answers here. So increased RBC production and increased breathing rate. If you want to study more about breathing rate and how this is working, please refer to my video on neural and chemical regulation of breathing. Okay, of breathing. So there I have explained it in detail how central chemoreceptor, peripheral chemoreceptor, DRG, VRG, all of them function together. Okay. So I hope this was clear, and I'll also make another video where I will discuss all the changes, acclimatization changes that are happening in the body when you are at high altitude. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question number 14. Okay, the hemoglobin content per 100 ml of blood of a normal healthy human adult is, so you have your options A, B, C and D. This appeared in Means 2010. Clearly, I don't really need to discuss this. Again, if you watched my videos on breathing and exchange of gases, you would know what the answer is. And also, if you studied the chapter breathing and exchange of gases and body fluids and circulation, you would know what the answer is. It's D. Hands down, this is a fact. Okay, please remember facts and go, because you will get such questions like that. It's very easy to answer these questions and gain marks. So please read and go. Okay, so I know I don't really need to discuss this. A healthy individual has 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin in every 100 ml of blood. I mean, this is a straight up fact. Okay, move on to the next question. Alright, question number 15. There is no DNA in, we have your options A, B, C and D. This appeared in 2009. Mature RBCs, a mature spermatozoan, hair root and an enucleated ovum. So what do you think is the right answer? This is a very good question. This is a good question. We're able to trick you very easily. Oops, sorry. Trick you very easily. So what do you think is the right answer? Okay, so there is no DNA in A, mature RBCs. Clearly. Here, mature RBCs. Okay, we'll look at this in detail. Let's look at the discussion. So mature RBCs have no nucleus. They're enucleated. Okay, and there is no mitochondria also. Mitochondria also has DNA. Please remember, it's not only the nucleus, mitochondria also has DNA, and mature RBCs don't have that also. So there is no DNA, okay, in a mature RBC. A mature spermatozoan, it contains nucleus in the head region. It contains nuclear DNA, okay. Hair root also contains nuclear DNA, okay, and an enucleated ovum contains mitochondrial DNA. An ovum has, if it is enucleated, I mean there is no nucleus, but it contains mitochondrial DNA. Okay, contains mitochondrial DNA. So it is very easy to trick you into this mature RBC and enucleated ovum. So the answer should be mature RBCs. Okay, that should be the right answer. Okay, so this was a very good question. Please remember, please be careful when you are answering this question, but they trick you into the options. If you looked at, remember the first question also where we spoke about eosinophils and basophils. It was very easy to trick you into histaminase and histamine, and they use such words. So please be careful when you're answering that. In the first question, a clear giveaway were destructive enzymes. Okay, if you knew that, if you knew eosinophils are participate in parasitic infection and they release hydrolytic enzymes, you could have easily answered the question. Okay, so it is there are a few words here and there which are dead giveaways, okay, which you don't really need to think too much. You know that this is the right answer. Okay, in this, if you knew mitochondria is present or absent, where it is present, where it is absent, you could have easily answered this question. Okay, again, you need to be very clear with your theory, okay, in these questions. Okay, all right, so I hope I have answered this question. You go back to the question and look at it. So here there is no DNA in mature RBC. Enucleated ovum does not have nucleus, but it has mitochondrial DNA. Okay, and the rest other two have nucleus. So answer is A. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so we've come to the end of this video lecture, and I hope you've enjoyed this video lecture today, and I hope you've learned something new. And please like, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to MJ Need Biology. Okay, and I'll see you in the next video lecture. All right, bye.